Long ago, in a small village surrounded by a vast and ancient forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his two children, Hansel and Gretel. Their little wooden cottage was old and broken, and there were many nights when there was barely enough food to fill their hungry stomachs. Even though they lived in poverty, Hansel and Gretel found comfort in each other's company. Hansel was clever and courageous, while Gretel was gentle, loving, and always cared deeply for her brother. As the harsh winter approached, their situation became even worse. The woodcutter worked from sunrise to sunset, but the little money he earned could not provide enough bread for his family. Every evening, he sat quietly by the dying fire, his face filled with sadness as he watched his children go to sleep hungry. One night, after Hansel and Gretel had gone to bed, they heard quiet voices coming from the other room. Their stepmother was speaking to their father with a cold and worried voice. "We have nothing left to eat," she said. "Soon all of us will starve. Tomorrow we must take the children deep into the forest and leave them there." The father was shocked, and his heart broke at the thought. "How can I abandon my own children?" he replied with tears in his eyes. "They are all I have in this world." But the stepmother continued to persuade him until, with great sorrow and weakness, he finally agreed. Hiding in the darkness, Gretel began to cry softly. "Brother, what will happen to us?" she whispered. "Will we ever come back home?" Hansel gently held her trembling hands. "Do not be afraid, Gretel," he said. "I will think of something. I promise I will never leave you alone." Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Hansel quietly stepped outside beneath the moonlit sky. He picked up small white pebbles that shone like tiny stars and filled his pockets with them. A plan had formed in his mind. The next morning, their father took them into the heart of the forest. The trees grew taller and the path became unfamiliar. While walking, Hansel secretly dropped the pebbles one by one behind them. After reaching a lonely place among the trees, their father's voice trembled as he told them to wait while he went to cut wood nearby. But the children knew the painful truth. As his footsteps faded away, Gretel's tears fell onto the cold ground. The dark forest became silent around them, and their frightening journey had only just begun. After spending many frightening hours alone in the forest, Hansel waited patiently for the moon to rise. When the silver moonlight finally appeared between the trees, the small white pebbles he had dropped along the path began to shine softly. Holding Gretel's hand tightly, he followed the trail back through the dark forest until they finally reached their little cottage. Their father was overjoyed to see them alive. He embraced them with tears in his eyes, ashamed of what he had done. For a short time, the family was together again, and the children hoped their suffering was finally over. However, their happiness did not last long. As winter became colder, the food in the house disappeared once again. The stepmother's heart had not changed. One evening, she demanded that the woodcutter take the children into the forest a second time, even farther than before. The father tried to resist, but he was weak and filled with despair. Once again, Hansel and Gretel overheard the conversation. Hansel wanted to collect more pebbles, but this time the door was locked, and he could not go outside. "Do not worry, sister," Hansel whispered. "Whatever happens, we will face it together." The next morning, he hid small pieces of bread in his pocket and dropped them along the path as they walked into the forest. But after their father left them in the deep woods, Hansel discovered that the birds had eaten every crumb of bread. The children were truly lost. For days they wandered beneath the tall trees. Their feet became tired, their clothes became dirty, and their stomachs ached with hunger. Gretel often cried from exhaustion, but Hansel continued to encourage her. "Keep walking, Gretel," he said gently. "As long as we are together, we still have hope." On the third day, they noticed a beautiful white bird singing from a nearby branch. The bird flew ahead as if it wanted them to follow it. With no other choice, Hansel and Gretel walked behind it through the forest. Soon, they reached a strange and wonderful sight. In the middle of the forest stood a small cottage made of sweet cakes with windows of clear sugar and a roof covered with delicious gingerbread. The hungry children could not believe their eyes. Forgetting their fear for a moment, they slowly stepped closer and tasted a small piece of the magical house. Suddenly, an old woman's gentle voice came from inside. "Who is eating my little house?" Hansel and Gretel froze with fear, not knowing that behind the sweet smile of the old woman was a terrible secret waiting to change their lives forever. The old woman slowly opened the door of the sweet little cottage and smiled at Hansel and Gretel. Her voice sounded warm and kind, and her face appeared gentle like a loving grandmother. "Dear children, why are you standing outside in the cold?" she asked softly. "Come inside. You look hungry and tired." After spending days lost in the forest without enough food, the children believed her kindness was real. The cottage was filled with delicious meals, soft beds, and warmth they had not felt for a long time. The old woman gave them sweet cakes, warm milk, and fresh bread. For the first time in many days, Hansel and Gretel felt safe, but that feeling did not last. Late that night, Gretel woke up and saw the old woman's shadow moving strangely in the candlelight. Her sweet smile had disappeared, revealing a cruel expression. The old woman was not a harmless grandmother. She was a wicked witch who had built the candy house to trap hungry children. The next morning, the witch captured Hansel and locked him inside a small iron cage. Her plan was to feed him until he became fat enough to eat. Gretel was forced to work as her servant, cleaning the house, preparing food, and obeying the witch's every command. Every day, the witch checked Hansel's finger to see whether he had grown fatter. However, Hansel was clever. He offered her a small chicken bone instead of his finger, and because the witch's eyesight was poor, she believed he was still too thin. Days passed and the witch grew impatient. She decided that she would cook Hansel the next morning, whether he was fat or not. She ordered Gretel to prepare the oven. As the fire burned brightly, the witch asked, "Child, look inside and tell me if the oven is hot enough." Gretel knew this was her only chance to save herself and her brother. She pretended not to understand. "I am too afraid, grandmother. Please show me how to look inside," she said. The witch leaned toward the oven to demonstrate, and in that moment, Gretel gathered all her courage and pushed her inside. She quickly shut the heavy door, and the evil witch was defeated forever. Gretel ran to free Hansel from the cage, and the two children hugged each other with tears of joy. Inside the witch's house, they found precious jewels and treasures, which they took with them before leaving the forest. After a long journey, they finally reached their home. Their father welcomed them with open arms, filled with regret and happiness. He promised never to leave them again. From that day forward, Hansel and Gretel lived together with love, safety, and enough food for the rest of their lives. And they never forgot that courage, wisdom, and kindness had saved them from the darkest moment of their childhood.